The bitter tea burned my raw throat, but the laughter of my husband and my sister burned worse. As my lungs collapsed on the cold linoleum floor of our apartment at 414 Elm Street, Mark stepped over my dying body, pocketing my keys. I died choking on my own blood, betrayed by the two people I loved most. My eyes snapped open to the harsh morning glare of October 14th, 2024. The digital clock on the mahogany nightstand at 812 Maple Terrace flashed 07:15 a.m. My chest heaved. I gasped for air, grabbing my throat, bracing for the burning agony of the aconite-laced brew. There was no burning, just the familiar hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the soft breathing of Mark sleeping beside me. I sat frozen, my fingernails digging into my own palms until the skin broke and a drop of crimson beaded on my skin. I was alive. The past life, 4 agonizing years of building Mark's culinary empire from the ground up, only to be poisoned, framed for corporate theft, and left to rot while Mark and my sister Clara celebrated over my corpse, was gone, erased, or rather, waiting for me to rewrite it. A cold, heavy stillness settled over my bones. My heart rate slowed from frantic panic to a steady, rhythmic thud. No tears, no dramatic gasps. I had spent my last life crying. This life belonged to executioners. Mark stirred beside me, rolling over with a lazy groan. "Babe, are you up? Make that signature truffle-infused braised short rib recipe today. Investor meeting is at noon. If we nail this, the Golden Hearth is going nationwide." He said it so casually. The exact words he had spoken on October 14th, 2024, right before handing me the poisoned ledger to sign over my intellectual property rights. In my past life, I had beamed with pride, kissed his cheek, and handed him my grandmother's handwritten recipe book, a sacred heirloom containing decades of secret culinary formulations, flavor-balancing charts, and proprietary ratios passed down through generations of my family. I looked down at him, my expression blank, my jaw locked so tight my teeth ached. "Sure, Mark," I said, my voice eerily smooth, devoid of the warmth he expected. "I'll get right on it." He didn't notice the strange inflection in my tone. He was too busy scrolling through his iPhone 15 Pro, checking reservation metrics for his failing upscale bistro, the Gilded Spoon, located at 784 Grand Avenue. Back then, the restaurant was bleeding money, drowning in supplier debt and poor reviews. My family's recipes, specifically our legendary slow-braised short ribs and secret blend demi-glace, were the magic elixir that turned his failing business into a Michelin-starred sensation. I slipped out of bed, walking down the hardwood stairs with calculated, deliberate steps. The house smelled faintly of burnt toast from yesterday's rush. I walked straight into the home office. The safe was tucked behind a heavy oil painting. Mark thought he was the only one who knew the combination. He didn't know that, as a certified paralegal before I gave up my career to help him, I understood corporate asset protection better than anyone he had ever hired. I opened the safe. There sat the leather-bound family recipe book, alongside our joint business incorporation documents and trademark applications. I didn't hand it to him. Instead, I opened my laptop, connected to the US Copyright Office portal, and pulled up pre-prepared digital patent and intellectual property registration forms. For the past 3 weeks of my reawakened existence, Days spent hiding behind locked doors while Mark was out. I had been drafting legal utility patents and trade secret protections for every single proprietary dish in that book. Not just general copyright, but hyper-specific chemical flavor profiles, cooking temperature curves, and exact ingredient ratios. By 9:07 a.m., the official electronic filing receipts pinged in my inbox. Application received. Priority filing status granted. Mark walked into the kitchen wearing his chef's coat, smelling of cheap cologne and stale espresso. Where's the recipe breakdown for the investors? They're arriving at the Gilded Spoon in 3 hours. I turned around slowly, holding a porcelain mug of black coffee. I looked him dead in the eye. Here, I said, sliding a sleek manila folder across the marble countertop. He grinned, his chest puffing out with that familiar, arrogant swagger. Knew I could count on you, honey. Clara is meeting us there, too. She wants to see the look on the investors' faces when they taste your ribs. Clara. My sweet, innocent younger sister, who had spent my final hours stroking my hair while slipping neurotoxin into my teacup. Tell Clara I wouldn't miss it for the world, I whispered, a chilling smile touching the corners of my mouth. The VIP dining room of the Gilded Spoon hummed with the nervous energy of high-stakes finance. At the center table sat Vincent Vance, the ruthless venture capitalist notorious for backing culinary empires, flanked by 2 senior associates from Vance Capital Partners. Mark stood at the head of the table, beaming like a king claiming his throne. Clara sat to his right, wearing a designer silk blouse I had bought her with my own savings, her eyes gleaming with predatory excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mark announced, raising his glass of sparkling water. "What you are about to experience today is not merely food. It is culinary alchemy. The legendary braised short rib recipe, a closely guarded family secret, is exclusively licensed to the Gilded Spoon. With Mr. Vance's capital infusion of $2 million, we will expand this exact menu to 10 major metropolitan locations by next quarter." Vincent Vance raised a skeptical eyebrow, cutting into the tender, dark meat short rib, resting on a bed of parsnip puree. He took a slow, deliberate bite. The room went dead silent. Vance chewed, closed his eyes, and a slow, appreciative smile spread across his face. "Magnificent," Vance murmured, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. "The depth of flavor, the precise caramelization of the reduction. It's flawless, Mark. I'll have my legal team draw up the investment contract by tomorrow morning." Mark practically vibrated with triumph. He shot a triumphant, patronizing glance toward me, sitting quietly in the corner booth near the service entrance. In his eyes, I was still the obedient, downtrodden workhorse wife, useful for my labor, invisible in public. Clara leaned over, whispering loudly enough for the table to hear. "Honestly, Mark, you didn't even need her here. You're the real culinary genius. Anyone can follow a recipe, but it takes an artist like you to execute it." I took a slow sip of ice water, watching them through half-lidded eyes. Let them celebrate. Let them drink deep from the cup of their own delusion. The next morning, the investment contract arrived via courier at our home on Maple Terrace. Mark practically threw the document onto the kitchen island, shoving a gold-plated fountain pen into my hand. "Sign it, honey," Mark purred, wrapping an arm around my waist, his breath hot and reeking of manufactured charm. "Once this goes through, the Gilded Spoon is officially registered under our holding company, and we're unstoppable. You'll never have to worry about money again." In my past life, this was the exact moment I signed away my sole proprietorship rights without reading the fine print, handing over 100% of the commercial exploitation rights to Mark. This time, I looked down at the paper. I unscrewed the cap of the pen, my hand remarkably steady. I didn't hesitate. I signed my legal name, Victoria Hayes. Mark let out a triumphant exhale, kissing the top of my head. That's my girl. Now get ready. We're hosting a grand celebration dinner at the restaurant tonight with Vance, Clara, and all our primary suppliers to announce the nationwide expansion. I'll be ready, I said softly, stepping away from his touch and smoothing down the fabric of my black wool dress. Throughout the afternoon, while Mark was busy coordinating press releases with local food critics from the Metro City Gazette, I made a few quiet phone calls. First, to my intellectual property attorney, Arthur Pendleton, confirming that the utility patents for the proprietary short rib preparation method and spice blend had officially cleared preliminary examination. Second, to the City Health Inspector's office, filing an anonymous, highly specific tip regarding unauthorized commercial food preparation methods being utilized in the Gilded Spoon's basement prep kitchen. By 7:00 p.m., the Gilded Spoon was packed to capacity. Flashbulbs popped as local journalists photographed Mark standing beside Vincent Vance under a massive neon sign reading The Gilded Spoon, Nationwide Expansion Kickoff. Clara was holding court near the bar, sipping a dirty martini and laughing shrilly as she recounted to a group of investors how she had personally helped Mark refine the restaurant's business strategy. I stood near the service pass-through, holding a silver tray, watching the room with eyes as cold as winter stone. Mark walked over, flushed with wine and adrenaline, grabbing a microphone from the DJ booth. "Before we toast to our future," Mark shouted over the restaurant's sound system, "I want to thank my incredible business partner and wife, Victoria, for stepping back and letting me take our family recipes to the world stage." Applause erupted. Dozens of heads turned toward me. Camera lenses zoomed in on my face, expecting tears of gratitude. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. Instead, I set my tray down on the counter with a sharp, echoing clack that cut through the applause and reached into my designer handbag. The heavy thud of my tray, silencing the dining room, was followed instantly by the sharp, authoritative jingle of brass buttons and heavy boots. The double doors of the Gilded Spoon swung open wide. 3 uniformed officers from the Metro City Police Department, accompanied by 2 federal intellectual property enforcement marshals, walked straight through the center of the dining room. Leading them was Arthur Pendleton, carrying a thick leather briefcase stamped with federal seals. The camera flashes stopped. The ambient chatter died instantly, replaced by a suffocating, dead silence. Mark's smile faltered, his expression twisting into confused irritation as he lowered the microphone. "Excuse me, officers. This is a private corporate celebration. Can I help you?" Arthur Pendleton adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses, stepping forward into the spotlight. He didn't look at Mark. He looked directly at Vincent Vance and the assembled press corps. "Marcus Vance, no relation to the investor. You are hereby served with a federal cease and desist order alongside an immediate ex parte seizure warrant for trademark infringement, patent violation, and commercial misappropriation of proprietary trade secrets," Arthur announced, his voice carrying clearly across the silent restaurant. Color drained completely from Mark's face. His jaw went slack. "What? What are you talking about?" "Those are my recipes, my family's recipes." "Correction," I said, stepping out from the shadows of the service pass-through, my heels clicking sharply against the Italian tile floor. "They belong to the Hayes family lineage, specifically registered under United States Patent and Trademark Office numbers US 2024 8849-102B, and US 2024 8849-103F, filed and granted 36 hours ago. Mark whipped his head toward me, his eyes wide, bulging with sudden, primal terror. Beads of cold sweat broke out across his forehead, matting his styled hair. Victoria, what is this? What kind of sick joke are you playing? Tell them we're partners. I stopped 2 feet away from him, looking down at him with an expression of absolute, clinical detachment. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke with the calm precision of a judge delivering a death sentence. We were partners, Mark. In my past life, the one where you poisoned me with aconite in our kitchen, watched me suffocate on the linoleum floor, and stole my life's work. We were partners, I said softly, loud enough only for him and Clara to hear. Mark stumbled backward, his knees knocking against a brass cocktail table. His breath hitched violently. He grabbed his chest, his eyes darting frantically to my face. You... What? How could you possibly? That's impossible. You thought you were the only one who could rewrite history. I tilted my head, my lips curving into a razor-thin smile. You taught me how ruthless the culinary world is, Mark. I simply learned the lesson better than you. Clara shoved her way through the paralyzed crowd, her designer blouse rumpled, her face contorted in frantic hysteria. "Arrest her!" Clara shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She's insane! She forged those documents! We worked together to build this restaurant. Right, Mark? Tell them!" Vincent Vance slowly stood up from his VIP table, his face dark as a thundercloud. He looked at Mark, then at the federal marshals, and finally at me. "Mr. Marcus," Vance said, his voice dripping with lethal contempt, "you induced my firm to sign a $2 million investment contract based on fraudulent commercial assets that you do not legally own. My legal team will sue you into bankruptcy before sunrise." "No, Mr. Vance, please, wait," Mark stammered, his palms slick with sweat as he grabbed at Vance's tailored suit jacket. "It's a misunderstanding. We can fix this. Victoria, please, drop the lawsuit. We're husband and wife." "Not for much longer," I said, sliding a manila folder containing pre-drafted fault-based divorce filings, complete with financial forensics proving Mark's embezzlement and infidelity with Clara, across the marble bar top. "The divorce papers are already filed, Mark. Asset seizure is underway. The bank accounts attached to the Gilded Spoon have been frozen under federal injunction." Mark stared at the folder, his knees finally buckling. He dropped heavily onto the floor, his designer chef's coat catching on the edge of a chair, staring blankly at the polished tiles as the federal marshals stepped forward and slapped steel handcuffs around his wrists. Clara let out a blood-curdling shriek, collapsing onto the floor beside him, weeping hysterically as camera shutters finally resumed, not capturing a grand expansion, but recording the complete, humiliating annihilation of their criminal enterprise. 3 months later, the autumn chill gave way to the sharp bite of January wind. I stood on the 3rd-floor balcony of my newly acquired penthouse loft on 500 Waterfront Drive, holding a warm cup of herbal tea. Down below, the rusted neon sign of the Gilded Spoon had been stripped from the brick facade. The building was boarded up, locked in receivership, while federal courts auctioned off every remaining fork, stove, and table to satisfy Vincent Vance's multi-million-dollar fraud judgment. Mark was currently sitting in a holding facility, awaiting trial for corporate wire fraud and intellectual property theft, facing a mandatory federal prison sentence. Clara had been abandoned by every friend and investor she had ever manipulated, forced to move back into a cramped, dismal studio apartment on the wrong side of the city, drowning in legal debt she could never repay. They had tried to destroy me with poison and betrayal. Instead, they had built the scaffold for their own execution. My phone buzzed on the patio table. It was an email notification from my legal counsel. The international patent licensing agreements for the Hayes family recipe collection had officially cleared, netting an initial quarterly royalty advance of $1.5 million from a major global hospitality conglomerate that had bought exclusive rights to distribute my culinary portfolio worldwide. I took a slow sip of my tea, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. No fear, no hesitation. Just the quiet, unbreakable power of a woman who walked through hell, remembered every single footprint, and came back to burn the kingdom down. I closed my eyes, breathed in the crisp river air, and smiled. The kitchen was mine, the recipes were mine, and my life, fully, sovereignly mine, was just beginning. Part 1 continued. Mark was still rambling about his breakfast meeting, his fingers tapping an anxious rhythm against the kitchen counter, completely oblivious to the volcanic fury churning beneath my calm exterior. I kept my breathing measured, inhaling the scent of bleach and stale coffee that lingered in our kitchen, the exact same smell that had clung to my clothes on the day I realized Mark was systematically siphoning funds from our joint savings account to fund Clara's luxury shopping sprees. In my past life, I had excused his late nights, excused his clipped answers, excused the way he looked at my sister when he thought I wasn't watching. I had convinced myself that keeping the peace was the same thing as keeping a marriage. What a pathetic, gullible fool I had been. My own naivety had been the sharpest knife pressed against my throat. "Did you hear me, Victoria?" Mark snapped, his voice sharp with irritation as he caught me staring blankly at the wall. "The investors are notoriously difficult. Vance does not tolerate mediocre flavor profiles. If you mess up the reduction time on the demi-glace like you did last Tuesday, we are dead in the water." Tuesday. In my past life, last Tuesday was the day Mark had intentionally distracted me while boiling the stock, causing it to burn slightly, which he then used as ammo to publicly humiliate me in front of our line cooks, calling me incompetent and unfit to manage our shared business. Every single microaggression, every engineered failure, every gaslighting tactic was calculated to erode my self-esteem until I willingly surrendered sole ownership of my family heritage just to win his fleeting approval. "I didn't burn anything last Tuesday, Mark," I said quietly, turning my head to look him dead in the eye. "And I certainly won't burn anything today." He blinked, taken aback by the eerie steadiness in my tone. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of confusion crossed his features, as if he sensed the invisible boundary line between the woman he had crushed and the woman standing before him now. But his arrogance, his fatal blinding arrogance, quickly rushed back to fill the void. He scoffed, adjusting his chef's apron with a theatrical flourish. "Just make sure the paperwork is signed by tonight," Mark muttered, grabbing his leather messenger bag from the bar stool. "And wear that blue dress. Vance likes his business partners to look polished. We need to project an image of absolute unity." Unity. The word tasted like ash on my tongue. "I'll wear whatever is appropriate for the occasion," I replied smoothly, watching as he grabbed his car keys and strode out the front door, slamming it shut behind him with a resonant thud that shook the hallway frame. The moment the front door clicked shut, the silence of the house wrapped around me like a protective shroud. I didn't waste a single second. I set my coffee mug down on the counter and strode purposefully into the basement storage pantry. Behind a stack of old, unused catering crates sat a heavy metal lockbox one Mark thought contained only expired tax documents from our first year of marriage. He was wrong. Inside that lockbox, tucked beneath old utility bills, was something far more damning. The original hard copy ledger containing Mark's secret offshore bank account details, handwritten notes outlining his scheme to divorce me after the nationwide expansion, and, most importantly, signed confessions from our head accountant detailing how Mark had forged my signature on previous corporate debt restructuring forms. I pulled my smartphone from my pocket, snapping crystal-clear photographs of every single document, uploading them directly to an encrypted cloud server accessible only by Arthur Pendleton, the senior partner at Pendleton & Associates Corporate Law. My phone vibrated in my palm. An incoming text message from an unknown number. I tapped the screen. Preview of the final investment contract attached. Make sure Victoria signs over her moral rights to the recipes, or Vance pulls out. Clara. A cold, humorless laugh escaped my lips. Clara didn't even bother hiding her collusion anymore. In the old timeline, she had played the role of the sympathetic, supportive sister, while slowly poisoning my mind against my own parents, convincing me that giving Mark full control of the recipes was the only way to prove my loyalty to our family. I tapped out a reply with my thumbs, my movements deliberate and icy. Consider it done. See you at lunch. I slipped the lockbox back into its hiding place, locked the basement door behind me, and walked back upstairs to the master bedroom. I opened my walk-in closet, sliding past the expensive designer gowns Mark had bought me with embezzled money, and pulled out a sharp, tailored black blazer. If I was going to execute a corporate execution, I wanted to dress appropriately for a funeral. My reflection in the full-length mirror showed a woman who looked calm, collected, and dangerously composed. I finally reclaimed everything they tried to steal, and I walked away untouched and unstoppable. If you felt the weight of this justice, hit the like button. Share this story with someone who deserves a second chance to reclaim their power, and subscribe to follow my next rebirth journey.